region of North Africa next to the Mediterranean, the Atlantic Ocean, and the Sahara Desert, the land of Berbera before the Islamic Empire, coveted natural resources and very close to Europe, Portugal, Spain, Italy, France, and even Greece, but that also indoors connects with the Saharan doors of Africa, Mauritania, Mali, Chad, Niger, and Burkina Faso. When we go to the map, the Maghreb has a reverse L. What interests are in this area? What bilateral conflicts decide the relation between these countries? Is there a paralysis, or the moves are going? This is our critical move today. We start looking factors and actors involved. If we listen to the contemporary history of this region, struggles, riots, paradoxes, and contradictions, today it is marked by social political changes in Tunis as of 2010 with the so-called Arab Spring, plus the current stagnation, the defeat of Muammar al-Gaddafi in Libya 2011 that brought more division and the creation of a failed state, and not the one that the West recalls, but a true failed state. The dispute between Morocco and Algeria because of Spanish era that is struggling for its independence, slavery, and other internal problems in Mauritania. Relations with the petro-monarchies of the Arab Gulf, the countries of the African Horn, and with Europe because of the proximity we were talking about. Maghreb. Let's go to the characterization of our zone of study, the Maghreb. Its name comes from an Arab voice that means the place where the sun sets. A northern region of the African continent borders with the Mediterranean, the Atlantic Ocean, and the Sahara Desert, composed by Mauritania, Morocco, Algeria, Libya, Western Sahara, occupied by Morocco, and in process of decolonization. This cordillera expands by the west. Their original population are Berbera, and the history of Maghreb is linked to the Mediterranean, Phoenicians, Islam recovery, and Christian Spanish recovery, and later expulsion of Muslims, European colonization, decolonization, and disputed territories of the Sahara. It has more than 86 million people, of which the majority is Muslim and Sunni denomination, together with different religious minorities, including Jewish and Christian. Most talk Arab Maghrebi, which is the official state language in almost all states, although they also speak Berber, French, and Spanish in West Arab. It belongs to the Arab League, and in 1989 they created the Arab Maghreb with scarce resources. They have important mining resources, phosphates and iron, natural gas and oil. Together they contribute with a fourth of the African wealth in the process of modernizing. It has huge divisions. I go to the Spanish Vanguardia that publishes the paralysis of Maghreb is terrible. These were words pronounced by Umar Tayeb Bakuche, who has regretted the separation of the member countries, Mauritania, Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, and Libya, which heads of states have not met since 1994, with a periodicity established in the charters. Since then, he says, the presidencies or monarchies have been replaced, and he is sorry that in relation to other blocs that work as strategic alliances in Africa and the rest of the world, the commercial exchange among the members of this Maghrebi organization, with secretaries as its seat in Rabat, is one of the world's weakest. A key point to start analyzing, because that was our purpose, go from the general information to the specific, is the dispute between Algeria and Morocco for the West Sahara. The first supports the sovereignist struggle of the Sahrawi people, and the second one, the richest part of the land. Some details with Latua Maklatiche from South Africa on this, which is one of the determinant topics.
King Mohammed of Morocco has extended.
Rey Mohammed de Marruecos.
King Mohammed of Morocco has extended its hand for many years to Algeria. This week he talked about Algeria as a brother country, and he's willing to renew relations. This is nothing new, because the king has sought for a reconciliation. They have political and ideological differences. Western Sahara is disputed between Morocco, Algeria, and Mauritania, but especially controlled by Morocco, is a problem for Algeria. Morocco insists that this is part of its kingdom, but Algeria supports the Belisarian sector of the Western Sahara, who are seeking self-determination. Morocco has had several diplomatic disputes on this topic, and I'll tell you about South Africa. King Mohammed somehow ended a dispute with South Africa. We don't have clear how South Africa changed its opinion, but Algeria would not step back in Western Sahara being an independent state. Let's see if the efforts of countries like Tunisia help to alleviate tensions and re-establish diplomatic relations. Thank you very much, Matua from South Africa. Let's ask ourselves in the effort to deepen how this historic conflict between Algeria and Morocco for the Western Sahara determines neighborhood in Maghreb regarding, according to the United Nations, it must be decolonized. We'll be back after this pause. We are back to continue developing our critical move. Maghreb, African door. Let's go once again to Prensa Latina that on February 1st published Sahrawi government supports UN policy for its autonomy. This is note the Polisario Front. Sahrawi authorities reiterated their support to UN procedures before the Security Council on the right of independence of this region occupied by Morocco. This is not sustainable, and it's an obstacle for peace, and we hope to find a long-lasting and peaceful solution that leads to a self-determination process. We're now going to our recommendation, an article published in rebellion.org called Between Do Not Forget Western Sahara, written by Francisco Campos Barbosa, graduated in social sciences at the University of Sao Paulo, has a master's degree in philosophy. Among other things, she says that if we find pictures of the Sahara desert, we find poor resourceless region. This is a mistake. This territory has great natural resources that starts in the Atlantic, which favors its fishing well, and also owns one of the largest reserves of phosphate in the world. The territory also has oil reserves and natural gas. We can confirm once again that what moves this cruel occupation in relation to Morocco is the economic interest on this territory. Communities don't have access to this wealth because of the construction of a huge wall, extremely militarized, that mobilizes thousands of military with the cost of $1 million per day. Don't forget about Western Sahara. At the end of the Independence War in 1962, 8 years after it started, Algeria inherited this Saharan territory that was colonized by the French. It promised to take care of this territory. Nevertheless, the Party of Independence, Adel Fassi, created the concept of the Great Morocco that disregards the bilateral borders imposed by France and seeks to rescue those territories it believes it's property. West Sahara and Mauritania. Grosso modo, this is the origin of an unresolved conflict which is so complex and which we aim to analyze in this critical move with everything related to this region called Maghreb. In 1963, the War of Sand started, where Moroccan armed forces confronted in different points to a less strong Moroccan force. This was a hard coup to Algeria. In the next decade, both Algeria and Morocco, armed with the sale of hydrocarbons and different international relations, Morocco allied with the West and Algeria with the East. Between 1969 and 1972, it did not ratify the treaty, expecting for the Spanish Maghreb. In 1973, the Popular Front of Liberation of Saghreb, called Polisario, was established, and in 1976, the Democratic Republic of Saudi was established. In November 1975, Morocco invaded the territory with 350,000 men, supported by a king. Spain withdrew its forces and Polisario Front claimed sovereignty. Today, Morocco controls the coast and spaces rich in resources. Independentists control a small desert strip with support of Algeria. In the end of the 80s, United Nations mediated negotiations and a ceasefire, but that was ended. Morocco imposed the visa to Algeria, and in response, Algeria closed the bilateral border, and this is how it remains for 24 years. The resolution of the Sahara is a condition to resolve this. Hostile diplomatic relations mark bilateral relations and see that the solution is not close. From Chile, we have Pablo Jofre, Chilean journalist and international analyst, master in international relations, specialist in Latin America and Middle East and Maghreb. We can't have a better guest, Pablo. We have two investigations ongoing, one on the struggle of the Saharawi people and another topic of our critical move today is Maghreb. There are several actors on the Maghrebi board, each one with its own specificities. We don't pretend to finish the topic in one single chapter, but we want to make the most a good approach, and we want to talk about the social political changes the region has undergone. And we have to talk about Tunisia and Libya. Good afternoon, Lucia from Santiago. An exception, the book about Sahrawi is already finished. It's called Dignity Lives in Sahara. It is written with information until 2017 for those of you who want to know more about the Sahrawi people. Having said this, and I resort to to your question. Yes, the zone of Maghreb corresponds to Morocco, to the Western Sahara, a territory occupied by Morocco, the self-determined Morocco, that also corresponds to Algeria, Libya, and Mauritania, is a broad zone in the African zone that has a very important goal, since there have been, it has been French, Spanish, and Italian colony. It's a very rich zone in hydrocarbon, gas, and oil. And as you said, especially in the Western Sahara, which is the Sahrawi Arab Republic, in the most important fishing areas of the Atlantic, not only for the zone, but also the European Union in general, fishes there and the agreements they make with Morocco depend on those fishing resources, and also phosphates that are used for agriculture, medicine, industry. So the zone has huge wealth, which has meant the presence of great powers. We can also mention a central element, the fall of socialism, and what this meant for Algeria, that was politically supportive of that field. And this caused the disputes at the time. Algeria supported the movements of national liberation, including, of course, the Polisario Front that sought for the self-determination of the Sahrawi people. After the Soviet fall came a process of deep political internal problems in Algeria that even led to a civil war with tens of thousands of deaths and instability for years. While Morocco consolidated with its monarchy with Hassan II and Hamel VI because of its nearness with Europe, France, and the United States. After the 90s and everything that this era, with the fall of the Soviet Union, came the so-called Arab Spring and the Islamic rebirth for the Muslim world. This marks an essential difference that starts with Tunisia. Let's remember, it went to Libya, and Algeria also has important elements, but the place of the total destruction of the political elements and infrastructure and a situation of an almost failed state at present is Libya, where Gaddafi was defeated. In Tunis, Ben Ali was defeated. In Egypt, more to the east, Hosni was also defeated. So the Maghreb generates a situation of almost a domino effect, while the fall of governments also took place to the east in a unstabilizing effect. In Libya, everything related to hydrocarbons, gas, and oil, but also the control of migration, and a very interesting situation because Libya represented the country with the best human development rates in all the African continent. It was a source of employment for many countries of the zone. The intervention of France, Great Britain, NATO, and the destruction of the Libyan state caused the current unstable situation with the eruption of terrorist movements that are still acting in the zone and that are causing problems for Algeria itself and Morocco also. Therefore, when we talk about Arab Spring from the Western point of view and Islamic rebirth from the Muslim point of view, we're talking about social rebellion processes that, for one, implied the destruction destruction of states, and for others, assuming a new perspective or new structure to generate the prosperity in those Muslim communities. At present, what we see is simply new disputes between Morocco and Algeria that have become acute according to the Algerian interests in the zone and the Moroccan interest with its alliances with the West, and how these disputes are mixed with other elements. For example, the people of Iran, the hashish trafficked by Morocco, which is the main supplier of drugs to Europe. Therefore, a political instability situation and the economic situation will create more dependence with European countries, especially a majoritarian young population, and at the same time the search for a new place in this zone. I would like to ask you for a clarification before we go to another question. What are the roots of this terrorism that you said affects Maghreb today? There are two main elements we must consider here. One, the war in Algeria and repression against the Islamic Salvation Front at the beginning of the 90s last year, which created a strong social crisis in Algeria. But at the same time, it remained there until 2011 with an unstable situation of Maghreb that moves to the east with Egypt, Syria, that was already established with Iraq, and we saw the appearance of terrorist movements, Takfili, that's how they're called, and close to Wahhabite ideology of Saudi Arabia, and it's the great supporter of all terrorist groups that operate not only in Maghreb but also the sub-Saharan areas, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, any of the groups that operate today in the sub-Saharan area are supported, sponsored by Saudi Arabia and all the sources that support these organizations. In this sense, there is a strong responsibility mainly of Saudi Arabia, but of course with the complicity of the United States, of European countries like France and Great Britain, that will also support Saudi Arabia to create this expansion of Wahhabism, because it was also about generating a wall against Libya in Maghreb as a state that for many years was a sponsor and supporter of national liberation movements, and in the Middle East and Central Asia, a break or a block to the Islamic Republic of Iran. So we can say that the current situation of terrorist groups that operate in Maghreb and sub-Saharan region, as well as the Middle East, are clearly correspondent and co-responsible with the Saudi monarchy, with Israel, a Zionist entity that has made its alliance with Saudi Arabia, the Persian Gulf monarchies, and of course nothing of this would happen without the support from Washington and its allies in NATO. During your initial historic review, you talked about the dependence of European powers. Maghreb is the entrance door of Africa and connects to the Mediterranean, the southern part of Europe, Spain, France, Portugal, and even Greece. I want to ask you, how does the relation take place today? Or what is that dependence with community countries? We can go from Libya to the east. In the case of Libya, undoubtedly, the country has been fragmented. It is a failed state. 3 zones, Sinaica, Tripoli, and Fresan, very clearly differentiated, where hydrocarbons is the main goal of the destruction of Libya. At this time, Western corporations, mainly European, like Eni, Fin, are exploiting Libyan oil that undoubtedly goes to European markets. When you go to the east, you see that Algeria has also had an approach with Europe, especially around the military expenditure, through agreements with Europe, especially to become a shade country, especially regarding terrorism, because Europe is highly interested in solving that. In the Libyan case, of course, the defeat of Gaddafi meant some kind of unleashing migration, and since it was upheld by Gaddafi, his defeat just opened the doors again and to migration. I talked about Algeria gas with this arms race they have with Morocco, and also dependence on financial relations with Europe. In the case of Morocco, the case of the dependence on France and Europe is clear, not only for because of the agreements that allow exploiting the resources of the Sahrawi people. The fishing agreements that Morocco signs with the European Union just allows Europe to take away the fish from Sahrawi coasts. These also provide arms to repress Morocco against the Sahrawi people. Lucia, you were once mentioning a wall 2,700 kilometers that crosses from Morocco and its limit with Algeria to the south and its limit to Mauritania. 2,700 kilometers of a wall that cuts into the Democratic Sahrawi Republic, those were under Moroccan control, and liberated territory. So this is dividing this republic in two. Algeria and Morocco have understanding problems and diplomatic relations and trade, not only because they don't reach agreements because of the borders, but also the dispute related to the Sahrawi Democratic Republic has not been ended. Most refugees are on Algerian zone called like Titouf. There's a critical situation in Morocco related to drug traffic. 80% of drugs consumed in Europe come mainly from the North African zone, namely Morocco. They talk about the agreement among politicians, the military corps and all, the Moroccan bureaucracy, in agreement, of course, with European drug traffickers that take drugs to Europe. Let's also remember that Morocco has become a plug for possible sub-Saharan Maghrebi migrations. European soldiers help to this plug, where they impede people trying to cross to the European continent. This means that once again we see political migration elements, economic elements, military struggles, and undoubtedly all the financial, political, and military power of the European countries depend on this. I would like to ask you about the Sahrawi conflict and some precisions. First, in your opinion, what the resolution to this long dispute would depend on what? It seems that the sovereignty of the Sahrawi people is trying to be buried under the desert, and if strategic resources are set as political conditionals. Lucia, I'm very pessimistic regarding the solution of the Sahrawi Democratic Republic, which makes me very sad and makes me angry because there are two responsible entities here. The main responsible entity, of course, is the occupying power, the Moroccan monarchy, that in 1975 taken advantage of the agreement between Mauritania and Spain, the treason of Spain with a national government that is completely unstable, delivers Western Sahara to Moroccan hands. That is a betrayal of Spain that we know until today. If there is something that should hit the conscience of the Spanish people, is the treason committed against the Sahrawi people. In 1975, the Sahrawi people should have been completely independent. And this did not happen because of the underground alliance between the Spanish monarchy with a dying monarchy and a monarchy elected by Hassan II that distributed wealth and land, and undoubtedly that monarchic relation continued with Juan Carlos I and Philip VI with Morocco. So, in view of your question, what can be the solution? Undoubtedly, France should stop supporting Morocco with arms, political support, and vetoing in the Security Council every time this topic comes out. Spain should have a main role in the sense of becoming the struggle point of the Sahrawi people, because in 1974, the people of the Sahrawi Desert were declared Spanish citizens. This is another treason because it was a Spanish province, and they always stepped back regarding Morocco and the monarchy. They've always accepted the threats of Morocco, and they have always allowed people to cross to the Gibraltar Strait and flood in Spain. There's a treason of Spain, scarce commitment, no matter what party in Spain. And this, they should be not only present every day when this monarchy and government start talking about other countries' democracy and try to teach about democracy. This is an element that should be in the conscience of the Spanish. 250,000 refugees in the Tindu camps under unbearable conditions for any other people that is not the Sahrawi people. The Moroccan support with arms. Spain is one of the main suppliers of arms in Morocco. So there are two core elements, France and Spain, as they stop supporting Morocco and sustaining a corrupt monarchy like the Moroccan monarchy that violates the human rights of the Sahrawi people, could be the first step to reach the freedom of Sahrawi people. This will not be done because Spain has interests in that land, and France wants to recover the imperial idea it had at a given time in the Maghreb. If those countries stop supporting and behaving in violation against international legislation, the Democratic Sahrawi Republic could become a reality more than today. 85 countries recognize this republic. 193 must recognize them. That about Spain and France. I ask you about United Nations. What about this international organization that has clear resolutions, which is say this territory has pending its independence, and these resolutions are violated as happens between Israel and Palestine. So I go back to United Nations. What happens there? United Nations has behaved in the same shameful and hypocrite way as France and Spain. United Nations were created in 1991. When the war ended in 1975-1991, a Peace Corps was created called La MINUSO, the mission of the United Nations for the Western Sahara. And that mission continues since 1991, but it has merely been used to establish good compensations for the staff that works there, the best hotels, the best cars, a very good life at the expense of the Sahrawi people. And there's, you can see the mission in the refugee camps in Tindouf, but they don't comply. No mission destined to the self-determination of the Palestinian people. The Sahrawi people continue seeing their rights violated as Israel violates the Palestinian rights. And with all due respect, your comparison is very good. Occupation, wall, apartheid, human rights violation, prison for leaders, the black jail in Morocco where hundreds of leaders live in dignified conditions. The Ban Ki-moon himself, former General Secretary of the United States, 2 months before he quit, traveled to the camps, and he was forbidden to enter occupied territories, so he visited liberated territories. He was moved with the situation and how the Sahrawi people live, that in spite of poverty, it's a well-organized, politically clear, dignified people. Ban Ki-moon said that the self-determination of the Sahrawi people was necessary. And what happened? Morocco immediately presented a claim before the Security Council, and Ban Ki-moon had to step back because it was a salutation to the Sahrawi people and authorities. He talked about Moroccan occupation, and that both for Morocco and Israel represents a vocabulary that cannot be expressed. And who defends Morocco and Israel? The same. France, Great Britain, United States, all those who believe that they continue governing the world with a certificate Democrats and establish what is a good government and what is not. I insist the United States have played a shameful, sad role. All general secretaries, in spite of the representatives of the Sahara that have had perhaps a better role, but never decisive. They do not decide. Their reports go to the Security Council, and in general, the only thing they do every April, every year since 1991, is once again to strengthen La MINUSO, for it to continue executing a mission that it never implements, that is the self-determination of the Sahrawi people. You were saying that bipolarity marked essentially Algeria went to the socialist field and Morocco to the other side. Today, understanding all the exceptions and differences that determine the current context, what about the alliances that are being made? How are moves occurring under the same reasoning or another one? Under different reasoning, the Cold War reasoning were clearer, more schematic. Algeria socialist field, liberation movements. Algeria negotiated with Vietnam the liberation of the last U.S. soldiers. It declared the war in 1973. It sent troops to support Egypt in the Yom Kippur War. Yasser Arafat opened an office in Algeria. So there was a square Algeria with the movements of national liberation. Many groups and organizations were formed in Algeria in favor of the self-determination of their people, while Morocco was living clearly under the direction of France, Spain, and the United States. When the Soviet Union fell, Algeria obviously presented a different situation, but that was not different with the separation of Morocco. there is no economic flow between these countries, and there's an oxymoron that large amounts of commercial relations have to go through other partners. They have to go through France, and this means that opportunities, positive opportunities of developing Maghreb are being lost. But it's not about developing at any cost, and I think that Algeria is right here. The bilateral disputes, border disputes, Western Sahara must be solved before thinking in a union of Maghreb. It's not, the oven is not ready for bread, they say. This great dispute, which is the self-determination of the Sahrawi people, will continue to be a spine in the heart of Maghreb. It will continue generating tensions between a government that is a republic with a constitutional monarchy. In other words, the current scenario shows that in spite of the geopolitical international scenarios, there are still some elements. The idea of the Great Morocco that includes part of the Algeria, the democratic, and even Mauritania is still in the political action of a large part of the Moroccan world. If that changes, you could think that there would be a dialogue, negotiations, and possibilities of agreement with Algeria that also has political problems of stability, but also of succession. We see that the current king will be present for a fifth term. This means that the political dynamic is not as efficient as quick, with a population between 14 and 20 years old that is almost 50% of the Algerian population. This means more employment, more need to open to other countries. And in this atmosphere, Morocco has done it more efficient than Algeria. Algeria has stopped the Maghrebi sub-Saharan region. Morocco has opened its doors to the world and has used even ideological and religious elements like Mohammed VI Institute, and all the support given to religious groups and a large amount of Muslim, African, and even Middle East countries. It has capitalized the Moroccan influence that goes up in front of Algeria. Yes, with problems derived from the 90s and all the repression, everything related with the economic elements in an economy that has not improved as it wished, and therefore Algeria aspires to stop depending on oil and gas, and this means opening to other channels, other markets, and open from the political point of view as well. The master lines of Bouteflika's program are based in 3 or 4 core elements: national conciliation, still from the 90s, the return of what they call the voice of Algerian diplomacy with the nations, and a reasonable focus on managing the internal political situation versus other threats of the national sovereignty. So external, internal, but very dependent one from the other as the only way of leaving stagnation. Now, Pablo, that in relation to alliances that exist in the midst of multilateral interests between these two actors, Algeria and Morocco, I would like to ask you about the relation with Russia, China, and the United States. 3 very important external actors. We're going to make a small pause and come back to listen to your answer about Maghreb, the door to Africa. Back to Maghreb, door to Africa, transcendental geopolitics. How do alliances take place that determines the social, political, economical arenas in Algeria and Morocco. We're going to talk about alliances and then the relation with three essential actors outdoors Maghreb: Russia, China, and the United States. Algeria has Sahrawi refugees and strengthens links to Nigeria to build a strategic work, the Trans-Saharan gas duct in cooperation with Mali, Libya, China, and Russia. In this line of having friends, Morocco, with an unmovable position, continues diversifying relations, especially close links with the Gulf monarchies. Unlike the line of Gaddafi, none of the partners confront them. Like Sweden, European Union, and the United Nations, the closure of the border makes Maghreb the least integrated region of the world. Barely 8% of the Maghrebi trade is aimed to an outside. Besides, at the end of the 80s, the Arab Maghreb Ummah was a regional experiment to integrate the north of Africa, but that ended in failure because of the relations between Algeria and Morocco. A summit is being held since 1974. In May 2018, Morocco broke relations with Iran after accusing it of supporting Polisario through Hezbollah with the support of Algeria. I continue with Pablo Jofre, Chilean journalist, international analyst, specialist in topics of Latin America, Middle East, and Maghreb, and just concluded an investigation about the Sahrawi people. Now we want to talk about the relation with the United States, Russia, and China. What role do they play? Because please correct us if we are wrong. In that diversification of relations and alliances, Morocco has extended its hand to China and Russia quite clearly in order to have more allies. What has happened there? You're right, Lucia. The Moroccan monarchy, as 2016, not only started to make bonds with allies, clients, non-traditional states and countries. Not only did it have problems with the United Nations because of Ban Ki-moon's visit to occupied states, but in virtue of this volatility of the relations with France and the United States, he wanted to seek for new alliances. Since Morocco, have permanent alliance with the United States and the European Union, with which I trade most, I have a central element that has, with which I have problems, which is the Western Sahara. So I can't continue with a European Union that every once in a while declares its support to the Sahrawi alliance. So I'm going to approach not only the Persian Gulf countries and monarchies, which Morocco has done repeatedly and very efficiently with Moroccan diplomacy, under the concept of diversifying alliances both geopolitically and geostrategically. And therefore, in 2016, it met President Vladimir Putin and signed a strategic association agreement, as well as with China, with regards to minerals, oils, investments of these countries in Morocco. Under what allegation? And I remember that phrase. Mohammed VI said Morocco is free in its decision and does not depend on any country. Precisely, Morocco has shown that its country, with the fishing areas that do not belong to him, the phosphate areas that do not belong to him, is bringing this diversification creation of alliances in the economic field with many countries, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Russia, China, and investments in gas, ducts, and everything that can communicate the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, and which is an old dream of Algeria and alliance with the Sahrawi people. In the case of Russia, Moscow is very interested in expanding cooperation not only with Morocco, but with Algeria as well. Former Soviet Union had many links with Algeria at all levels: military, economic, technical assistance. Since the Declaration of Independence of Algeria in 1962 to 1990, they had a close relation between the Soviet Union and Algeria, and Russia, as it ordered its internal life, and Gazprom has approached the Algerian government that has one of the 7th most important oil reserves of the world and the 4th in gas. So there is a place to develop this cooperation, and Russia offers alliances that go beyond those offered by Europe and the United States, that in general, together with economic income and investments, they want military bases, strategic bases in the territories where they have economic alliances. So both countries are expanding their relations. It's part of the the core of its diplomacy and external trade, and especially it's a need from the point of view of going out from at last. They have been closed because of internal policy, low oil prices in the case of Algeria in the years where OPEC had very low prices, but there are also other elements. And this also includes the needs to expand cooperation and security because of the presence of what we were just talking about. Terrorist groups that fear and could move away investments. So, together with the European Union, the United States, and the classical allies of Morocco, Russia and China are being added, and Algeria are trying to add their classic Chinese and Russian allies, and also include Europe after a more aggressive diplomatic approach. It was a pleasure to have you here, Pablo, with all your knowledge on this zone. Thank you very much, Lucia. I would just like to end saying something. All this has a central axis, which is the need of the Sahrawi people's self-determination. If this is not achieved, no alliance, political, economic, have a sense, which is, and the core, which is human beings. Thank you. Well, let's go for our conclusions. It's a very interesting area, former colonies and full of wealth. Hydrocarbons, fishing blocks, and even for the zone and for Europe that are very close. In the contemporary history, talks about Algeria and the socialist bloc, and also Morocco, that confronted these actors in a war that is still effective in the Sahrawi conflict, that creates more diplomatic tensions, and that leaves the only African colony in the 21st century, which is full of interest for its strategic resources. The idea of the Great Morocco is still present as our guest told us, Algeria has stopped it. It has not expanded yet, like Morocco, that has imposed and capitalized the influence of monarchy that Mohammed VI built. Today it has political instability. It depends on the European Union and other factors that we will continue analyzing. Thank you very much for being with us.